Okay, so good afternoon. We'll get going in just a few minutes. We took last week off, so we're glad to be back. We'll let people log on. We'll do a normal market update. Just an ugly day today. Yeah, I mean, bad day in the market, but we had 7 straight positive days. So not a huge shock, just a really ugly day overall. So we'll go more into that tomorrow because I don't even want to look at that today. That was bad. But it's good to be back. I did take last week off. I hope everybody worked out well. There's no, even for today and coming up with topics to discuss, there's nothing earth-shattering happening in town. We'll talk about the animal shelter a little bit. Some town events and especially town projects that are happening that are moving forward here in Brantford. In the next couple of days, we'll talk more about state laws that have passed. Today, an environmental law was signed in Guilford. We'll talk about that, especially in context of Brantford, where Brantford's like far ahead in some of these things that are passing now at the state level. So that's a good thing to see. That being said, I have to first start by talking about something I posted on my personal page. We've talked about here a couple times, but some of the stuff is coming to fruition, so we will discuss it because it's just appropriate to discuss it. And it's public. So during the campaign in the last election leading, we're talking now, it's July, so 7, 8, 9 months ago, I'll basically state what I'll actually just read what I posted on my personal Facebook page. So let me pull that up. And if you're not friends with me on Facebook, you're free to add me. Although it's all pretty much public anyway. But I want to have this conversation publicly. I want to be open and as transparent as possible about what's happening. And so I want to read this. I posted this on my personal page, but this is I'll just read it here. I said, here's what's going on. I covered the 102nd District Legislative race last year and endorsed Robin Comey. Part of that endorsement was due to her opponent, Mark Riccio, making threats against me if I reported on his actual social media posts, his behavior, and actual discussions with me in other areas. Despite the threats, I reported on his actions fairly. Many also have seen his appearance on my podcast, Uninvited, where he made truly absurd and disgusting allegations in the comments. Yesterday, I received a letter stating that Riccio is suing me. I got this last week. The reason is he claims my coverage caused a pre-existing medical condition to flare up and cause him physical and emotional harm. Yes, you read that correctly. An elected official, who is also seeking higher office, is suing a member of the press, claiming that the coverage caused a health condition to reoccur. There are significant laws that deal with this, and it will be fine. But to those that have asked, this is taking place. This will not impact my covering news, events, in the podcast. One elected official upset with his coverage and the outcome of a race should never be able to bully the press from honest coverage. Mr. Riccio's attorney has asked to discuss the potential settlement. I have let him know there will be no settlement. No elected official, and one who willingly sought higher office and spends thousands in taxpayer money to that end, should be exempt from honest coverage. And if a member of the press cowers to the threats made, it does a disservice to all members of the press and real coverage of politics. I thank you. Thanks so many of you for your support that have reached out already. I will continue to post updates as I have them. And I really do. I mean that. The amount of calls and text messages that have come in that are aware of what happened. Many people know, obviously, more facts about him and the actions here and as this plays out. So I won't talk about too many of the details of the case, but the case is essentially that first of all, I can say that the filing has not been filed yet. I don't have a copy of an official copy from the marshal yet. But in it, it doesn't actually give any quotes or any specific dates of things that were said. So I'm sure at some point we'll get whatever the allegedly offensive quotes were. Secondly, the idea that our coverage was dishonest, we'll have to explore that. This is the law. That's just the way it will happen. And thirdly, the idea that a claim could be made of somebody who is an elected official, has run for office, is a public figure, then sought his party's nomination for state representative, then filed for state representative, then filed for $25,000 or so in taxpayer money to pay for his campaign. then to turn around and say I didn't like the coverage is interesting. And that he had a pre-existing condition that wouldn't be impacted by running for office, wouldn't be impacted by the normal stress of another campaign, but was impacted by something I said on a podcast where I frequently give my opinion on elected officials. And that's what this is, a commentary on events and elected officials. And so in his case, I gave a firsthand account of what happened between him and I, looking at his performance in town meetings, on videos, things of that nature, and I gave my opinion. If someone doesn't like that, they have every right to sue. And so we are looking at that in the next some point this week. This is life. It's not worth getting upset about. It's not worth going crazy over. Some people do this. This is their reaction to things. And, we have laws for a purpose. There's also laws that protect free speech. And the idea that someone could run for office and then turn around and sue the press in any way, whether it's a talk show or opinion show or the New York Times, can have a horrific effect of chilling free speech, of chilling honest exchange of ideas and opinions and coverage. And so that's scary. And if whatever happens here, if this case lasts 5 years, if my legacy is fighting for free speech, I will fight for free speech. I mean, there's no way you can walk away from a claim like this. He promised to sue over almost 2 years ago. He knew the incident that brought this out. He had posted some things online that were very much could be considered sexist. I called him on it. I was basically told off, told I would be sued and attacked, sued and financially ruined and a couple other things. And he felt if I reported it, I didn't report it till he ran for office. When he ran for office, I reported it and talked about it and gave my opinion of that. And so here's where we are. So it's an odd thing. I've been looking, attorneys I've talked to have been looking for other cases that are remotely similar to this. We can't find any. There are serious cases when it comes to like New York Times v. Sullivan, which sets the standard for what somebody has to prove. But in this case, it'll be an interesting discussion. So if Mr. Riccio has some evidence to support his claim, I'd like to see it, and we'll see it. And this is how the legal process plays out. So now I have gotten so many messages and text messages and calls on this. And so, and I appreciate those. Many have asked about funding the legal fees. Let's hold off on that for now. I'll take care of that for the time being. If anybody wants to donate to Branford 7, you can always go to Branford 7's website and donate. But when it comes to the legal stuff, if it becomes an issue down the road, I'd be glad to post that. But that's what we're looking at for the time being. So, I've been asked my thoughts on this, and I'll hold off on a lot to just say, sometimes you try to do the right thing, and there's just repercussions no matter what. There's people who have egos involved, and they think holding an office gives them some unlimited power that they can't be talked about, and their actions don't have consequences. And I am extremely proud in that election of endorsing Robin Comey. Even with the issue we had where she clearly drank too much and got up and spoke, or for better argument, and didn't speak, I'm proud of that. And based on what has happened since then, I'm even more proud of supporting Robin Comey in that election. I have endorsed Democrats and Republicans alike on this podcast for years. I've given personal experiences with them. I've talked about their performance as an elected official. I have never lied. I've never made things up. I have been as honest as I ever could be. And I've had to deal with Mr. Riccio for the last 2 years, making these threats, coming on the podcast. It just went back and forth from threats of lawsuits to, please set up a meeting, Steve, we want to meet and I need your support. I mean, it was just crazy things that are just not normal and not things that I'm used to doing when it comes to covering people like, Jamie Cosgrove or Ray Ingraham or Christine Cohen or Scanlon or real elected officials who hold office and hold it in high regard and high esteem. And so, you have someone that felt like doing this. You had an attorney willing to take it, who I know is a personal friend of his. So be it. He has the law to follow. I have the law to follow. And my attorney will have the law to follow as well. So it's a weird thing. yes, it's odd. At first, I didn't. My first thought was, is this the first half of it? Like, is there something else here? Like, what is the, and I'll read it to you. And they claim, clearly they said, he keeps saying I'm a self-described journalist, which is, whatever. During the same time, the defendants were publishing defamatory, false, inflammatory, and misleading statements. The plaintiff was hospitalized for a significant pre-existing medical condition. I don't know what that medical condition is. I still don't know what that medical condition is, and it certainly didn't prevent him from running for office and finding $20,000 in taxpayer money to run for office. This pre-existing condition can reoccur due to and be exacerbated by significant physical and/or mental stress. At the time the plaintiff became ill, the defendants were publishing videos of the entire Branford community. They called the plaintiff a racist, called into question his psychiatric condition, inferred that he was an alcoholic and had a gambling problem. So we'll go back and see. At some point, they have to actually tell us where that was said or where the quotes are. But in any event, so be it. And just defendants intentionally, recklessly, and negligently made false statements about the plaintiff in videos and podcasts. The statements were made with malice and with reckless disregard for the truth. These statements remain published in the public domain. They're on the podcast. It's true. The plaintiff experienced and continues to experience emotional, reputational, and economic damages because of the defendant's malicious conduct. So Mr. Riccio is experiencing emotional, reputational, and economic damages. I have, the only thing I can say to that is we've covered Mr. Riccio honestly. We covered his actions honestly. And on a podcast where I give my opinion on town events and elected officials and elected and political races, which I've done for quite some time now. It's an established podcast. We give our opinion on that, and I gave my opinion. And I was based on first-hand accounts with this person. So, whatever, these things just play out in court, and it's unfortunate. But that's what it is. I will tell you this, I'm not settling. Part of the question from the attorney was, any resolution to this matter will be contingent on my client's approval of the settlement agreement and could include an NDA, non-disclosure. I will not agree to that. So that's it. I believe I've been transparent. I believe this should be transparent. We should do this as an open forum. And you have seen firsthand what Mr. Riccio has done on these podcasts. You've seen firsthand the statements he's made. You've seen firsthand his actions. You can make a decision for yourself, and we'll let this court case play out. That being said, it puts some politicians currently in Branford in a tough position because in general, I don't think politicians want to sue the press. I don't think Democrat, Republican, on both sides have, I very much doubt they have any desire to sue the press, no matter what they said. We've had a member of the press in Branford for a long time state things that were inaccurate and blatantly dishonest about one party. No one ever sued. And they were easy to prove that the things were false, like literally things that were completely, that did not happen incidents. I have never seen a case like this. So part of me is, while it's, basically a pain in the ass, it could be groundbreaking. It could be a very interesting stance, and I appreciate all the support so far. So I didn't plan a lot this podcast to discuss besides that, but I did plan on discussing that because I posted on my personal Facebook page, and I do believe in making sure the public is aware of what's going on. We will write articles about this. We will cover it, barring a judge telling us not to, but I can't see that happening since the nature of this is so public. This is about a public official. It's about a public person who eagerly, of his own free will, sought higher office, put his name in the state secretary's state's office to run for the 102nd district, knocked on doors, took taxpayer money, sent out mailers, looked for notoriety, looked for attention, looked for people's votes, and then said, we're going to sue. Okay. That's where we are, and we'll deal with that. At the same time, so far it's played out in public, and it should play out in public the rest of the way. So that's all I really have to go over today. I didn't want to go over more than that. I wanted to make sure I said everything I had to say about this. And at this point, it'll be in the hands of the lawyers, and they can and push this forward. Once I find out exactly the statements Mr. Riccio finds offensive, I will read them to you. You can decide. If I have video of that, I will show that video as well. You could decide if it's offensive, and I will show the videos in their entirety in context of what I explained and what I said. I have not gone back and watched every video. I know the video with the endorsement in it. I clearly state I'm giving my firsthand opinion, firsthand account of what happened and my analysis of that. That's what an endorsement is by definition. So I'll wait for some more information from Mr. Riccio to come out and his attorney to come out on what their exact claims are. What quotes. Right now it says sometime, it gives like a month. He said this in a month. Like, we need the exact dates and quotes, obviously, at some point. Andrew, could you imagine if every politician sued all the press for everything the politician did not agree with? Be impossible to get court dates. Not only being impossible to get court dates, be impossible to get coverage. You know, if you start suing every single person with commentary and opinion or journalist, now I could say, listen, if a journalist writes, this politician is a pedophile, or this person, lied on the stand, or, something fundamentally factually wrong, there should be consequences for that. No question. No question. But, there are op-eds all over the place on the actions of attorneys, to actions of elected officials. When it comes to political races, we endorse candidates. And we endorse candidates, especially with local, with knowing interactions that we have had with those candidates. I've been honest about those interactions. I do not believe Mr. Riccio was fit to hold that office. Not in a million years. I have seen his behavior. I know it. And I will maintain that. I'm not going to shy away from what I've seen in my firsthand interactions with Mr. Riccio. That said, yeah, you have a right to sue. That said, the courts don't always take kindly to somebody abusing the court system. And there are, people who have the means can use the court system to attack another person, to tie them up in court, to try to drain resources of the other person. And granted, I've had people that have already said, I want to pay for this. So that's not going to be the case. I'm not going to go hungry defending myself here. But I do believe it's an important thing to do. And I do believe it's an important statement to make, that I will defend myself and in that way defend the press in general. The fact that we can have an open, honest conversation and give open, honest opinions about things is vital. It's who we are. It's what America is. And the idea that someone can run for office and then turn around and sue because they don't like what somebody said about them is crazy. And that's all there is to it. So that being said, I want to again thank you for all the support. I'm going to leave it at that for now until we have more information. The filing has not been done yet. I received this copy as part of a, hey, let's talk about a settlement kind of thing from the attorney. But I was told it'd be filed this week, so I'll wait for that, and we'll wait for the specifics of what the claims are to talk about those. That being said, I'm going to cut this short today, and tomorrow we'll get back into actual topics. If there are topics you want me to discuss, I'll do so. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we go there, the animal shelter did pass the Board of Finance 6-0, fairly easily, without much incident. The animal shelter raised, I believe, $180,000 in an additional fundraiser. So we have some elected officials that have already taken stances. Mark Riccio, for example, got up at the Board of Finance meeting and said along the lines of, I don't know much about this, but I'm not voting for it. So I don't know if that will change. I'm guessing what some elected officials, and we're not going to shy away from talking about Mr. Riccio because he's an elected official, but they very often people will take some stance to get attention, and then people go up and say, "Can we get your vote?" And then on the day of the vote, they come up and say, "Oh, listen, I changed my mind and I got the facts." And you should have got the facts before you publicly said you were going to be against it. But whatever. I know some Democrats were against it. I am going to guess that you're going to have almost everybody vote for this. I think we had some gentleman who's on the DTC Democratic Town Committee get up and give a rather embarrassing statement against this project a couple weeks ago at the Board of Finance level, I'm guessing, I could be wrong, that while there may be one or two no's, it'll be almost unanimous. I think most people will come around and vote for this, even the Democrats that have been fighting it privately will publicly come around and vote for this. And I think people love that attention. They like fighting something and acting like they're fighting it, and then, oh, all right, well, now I went and got the information, and now I'm going to vote for it. Well, you should have got the information before you started fighting it earlier. You should have got the information before you publicly came out and said, I don't know much about this, but I'm not voting for it, which makes no sense, and it doesn't help the town in any way, shape, or form. I go back to a very simple premise. The project makes sense. There was support for the project at a lower number. If the project was determined to be a need, then it's still a need. And waiting, now the cost of lumber has dropped, and it doesn't mean that we can't see some savings in the project going forward, but it doesn't make sense to delay it, 6 months, a year and a half, when you'll use that time of an effective animal shelter, and there's no guarantee costs are going to drop. And right now, not only is the issue the cost of goods when it comes to building, but also scheduling crews is almost impossible to do. As anybody's tried to get anything done in their home in the last few weeks, or a few months, I should say, since COVID started. So it doesn't make sense to put this off. It makes sense to vote for this. I think the RTM gets it tomorrow night. And I suspect that will pass. It will be a pretty spectacular record. Jamie Cosgrove has been in office 6 or 8 years. Just want to get his first one was Andy Campbell, Rabinowitz. So that's 2, 4. Then Linda Mallow, 6, and then unopposed. So he's been in now 4 terms. New Walsh Intermediate School, new Senior Center Community House, new Firehouse in Indian Neck, new animal shelter, the Blackstone Project, and everybody knows my views on the Blackstone Project. Somebody asked kindly, can you stop picking on the Blackstone Project? Here, I'm not picking on the Blackstone. It's done. It passed. It happened. The project was so drastically different than all of their town projects. It was not run by the town, they had their own building committee. They were not subject to the same FOI issues, FOI documentation, the same procedures as every other project. And so to this day, if you go and look for meeting minutes for the Blackstone Building Committee, they don't exist. There's nothing there. So from a member of the press saying, listen, I want to go find out what happened, he can't do it. If I go to the town building committee and I look at the Walsh Intermediate School or the Senior Center or they're there. There's meeting minutes. There's documents to review. There's openness. There's transparency. The Blackstone is not a town-run entity. We fund it, but it's a separate entity. It has its own trustees. And so as such, presenting some of their wants as needs rubbed me the wrong way, and I think a lot of people in town the wrong way. That project stands on its own in the way it was handled and the way it was presented. To this day, there's things in there that should not have been in that project. It never had to be as large as it was. I'm not picking on it. That's just the project we had. Now, there's no other really town departments that work that way, so I don't see that happening again. But that did happen, and I will always. But if you're a supporter of that project, that's one of the other things that got done. You have an 8-year period where a spectacular level of infrastructure was done. A spectacular level of projects were done. And I'm going to tell you this. We sat on, the seniors will tell you, they waited forever to get something done. Forever. Multiple administrations, decades. We have to do something. And nothing got done. Finally, something got done. The idea of taking down Branford Hills School. If you are happy with your park and on the Branford Hills side, that's a move Jamie Cosgrove made. If you're happy with the firehouse in Indian Neck, if you're happy with the community house getting done, if you're happy with the animal shelter moving forward, these are all part of long-term planning. And that's not just Jamie Cosgrove. It's Jim Finch. It's Joe Mooney. It's the Board of Finance. It's members that have taken a long-term view, realize that we have the money to do these things. We have smart fiscal planning to get these in place so we can do all of these huge infrastructure projects and not have massive increases in taxes. And if you compare Branford's tax rates to any of our neighboring towns, we are favorable in every way, shape, or form. That's really, really good leadership. And I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, if you are a mathematician looking at the numbers, that's just really good leadership. And that's bipartisan. 3 members of the Board of Finance are Democrats. And, Victor Casella is a significant donor to every Democrat that runs. Joe Mooney's the chair, a Democratic chair. Most of the RTM kind of avoided the senior center. You had one Democratic member of the RTM literally write the state against funding for the school, which is spectacular to me, but it is what it is. But these have been bipartisan. Most committees, until you get to the RTM, where the Democrats have added a level of politics which is kind of ridiculous, but all the other committees, Democrats, Republican, have worked together. Board of Finance, Democrats, Republican work together. Board of Parks and Rec, Police Commission, Fire Commission, they worked together to get these projects done on the same page. And so Branford is a town that has benefited from really good bipartisan leadership and really well-managed finances. And that's why we have the town we have. So on that note, so I think Ray just has a subcommittee for the animal shelters tomorrow night. And then I'm guessing, I don't know, next week or something is the vote for that. And I would imagine that will pass. That said, I want to thank you for joining me. And I mean this sincerely. Thank you for the support. It does mean a lot. When I get emails from people that, especially I don't know, I've gotten emails from people who I thought hated me. Like I've been hard on the podcast, hard on in coverage in the past, honest, but hard, that have sent me messages saying, Steve, I am completely behind you 100%. This is a big deal. And, getting sued as a member of the press happens. That's life. But, when you have, if the person was not a public figure, if they were just somebody that I had said something completely false about, who was a private citizen, not on any board, that's one thing. But for an elected official who sought out higher office, who sought $20,000, $25,000 in taxpayer money to run for office, to turn around because they didn't like it, then claim they had injuries. Okay, let's see. That's just spectacular to me. But here we are. This is the legal system. While everyone has access to a legal system, the legal system also has protections in it for free speech. And we're going to make use of those protections. So guys, thank you. We'll be back tomorrow and be a little more issues based. We'll talk about some laws that are passing at the state level. And I will see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I hope you all have a great night.